Hello, my name is David Martinez. I'm an American journalist and communications consultant living in Milan for the last 30 years. And this is Zoom In on the 2020 presidential elections in the USA. Why should we be talking about the presidential elections in Italy? Well, generally, American elections have some impact on us. Certainly, the United States is still an amazingly large economic power, military power, and political power, and and therefore the repercussions of this election will be felt in every democratic country, and not just every democratic country in the world. Same can be said for the Chinese elections. However, there isn't very much to talk about in Chinese elections or the Russian elections for the last 20 years either. So things have changed dramatically over the course of the last few American elections, and it's interesting also to see from a communications point of view just what has changed and what has remained the same. One of the things that changed dramatically 4 years ago was the presence of Donald Trump, who won the election, despite having no political background, no established electoral base, not even the support of his own party. And but he managed to do that primarily by totally dominating the news. He was the story every day, and he has been the story almost every day of his presidency, certainly every day of his candidacy. And so it's interesting to see if, in fact, this will continue in this next election cycle. It's to date, his time in office has often seemed like an unending election campaign. He talks very partisanly about his policies, frequently insulting his adversaries or anyone that disagrees with him. And so it'll be interesting to see if he still manages to dominate the news cycle. He has not been so successful recently. Basically, as the Democrats began their nomination process with the primaries in January, February, March, before COVID, he was still dominating the news, and the news was basically that the economy is great, America is great again, we're keeping the Chinese out, we're contesting the Chinese economy, things like that. And it seemed the economy was doing very well, especially the stock exchange. Unfortunately, COVID has had a rather decisive effect both on the health of the nation. The United States has lost more than 100,000 people to COVID, and has, I think, somewhere over 2 million active cases. And naturally, the response that defined, or that Trump wanted to use to define COVID was that it was unimportant, and the important thing was the economy. Unfortunately, that's not exactly how things developed. In fact, currently there are about 40 million unemployed workers in the United States, which represents about 20% of the working population. And that was as high as 60 million just a few weeks ago. So although the stock exchanges continues to impress investors, and more money seems to be heading towards the financial markets, there are still 40 million people that don't have jobs. And in the United States, if you don't have a job, you probably don't have health insurance. So we've seen cases of people going for COVID treatment and then receiving bills for hundreds of thousands of dollars, which most normal people can't pay. So the entire COVID experience has been quite dramatic for the economy, for everyday people, not so much for stock investments. On the contrary, it's still been good for a good time to invest in stocks. And maybe in the course of these weekly summaries about the state of the elections, we'll talk a little bit more about just why the stock exchange continues growing even when no one has work or a job. It's an interesting phenomenon. I mean, probably there are lots of different explanations, but we'll look into that among other things, because generally, although American elections influence a large part of the world does not really influence American elections very much. The Americans are not thinking about COVID in Europe. They're not thinking about COVID in Africa, South America. They're thinking about it in China, because that's an explanation for the entire problem. But basically, Americans live in America, and America is a bubble that they feel comfortable dealing with. Outside of America is much more difficult. And in fact, very few people are very well informed about what is happening outside of America. Mostly the television news will describe recently COVID disasters, and certainly Italian numbers, numbers in the UK of infections and mortality, Brazil recently, and different countries and things like that. But primarily American voters are more interested in their own personal situation, the country, and how the country is dealing with these problems. So they're not really considering I consider myself, since I've been here 30 years, I'm not exactly American anymore, although I still vote in the United States, just like I vote in Italy, and I have the opportunity to lose in America and in Italy, as frequently happens. In any case, we are not really what Americans are thinking about when they go to vote. Maybe you know the candidate, the Democratic candidate, because last week he was officially he officially reached a majority of nominee votes, and therefore he will, for all practical purposes, be the candidate for the Democratic Party. The man is Joe Biden. Maybe you've heard the name before because he was Barack Obama's vice president for 8 years. However, vice presidents really do not have extraordinary influence. They have influence, but not extraordinary influence. But basically, he was a long-term senator from a very small state, Delaware, squeezed between Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C., Maryland. And now he is the oldest candidate, I think, in the history of the United States. He's currently 77 years old. He's not black. He's not a woman. He's not gay. But he is considered the stable presence that the Democrats feel has the best chance to defeat Donald Trump. Whether this is possible or not is certainly up to the voters, and we'll follow this week by week as the election gets closer and closer. Recently, Biden has been almost invisible because there are no political conventions happening right now, or campaign events. The day after tomorrow, Trump was scheduled to hold a campaign event in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which may not sound like a very famous place. However, it represents for Black people one of the most brutal repressions in Black history in America. Somewhere in the order of 60 people were killed in one evening 60, 70 years ago. And it happened specifically on Juneteenth, June 17th. And that was the day in Tulsa that Trump wanted to have his campaign rally. He has postponed the rally because it was in such bad taste after the recent demonstrations for Black Lives Matter, after a Minneapolis police officer was filmed suffocating a Black man who was defenseless for all practical purposes. It was even Trump recognized that this might be a little too decisive or divisive, even for his candidacy. And so he's postponed that event. Also because his supporters were asked to sign a waiver or sort of a letter saying that they would not sue the Trump organization if they contacted the virus. Anyway, that's been postponed for now. Biden did speak the other day in Philadelphia in a small church setting with other priests, ministers, reverends from primarily from the Black community, indicating that this election, in his point of view, will be decided on a moral basis. That Trump is unable to sympathize with almost anyone, and that he, Biden, instead will be the person that brings together and finally resolves or begins the process of resolution for the racial inequality in the United States. Still to be seen. Anyway, if you stay with us every week, you'll receive a summary similar to this one of the weekly events. Of course, every week will get more and more intense because Donald Trump is an intense person, and his adversary, Joe Biden, will have to find a way to contrast the Trump style and still have people talk about him rather than just talking about how old he is, how white he is, etc., etc. So please, if you're interested in the American elections, stay with us every Monday, 9 p.m. on Facebook. And starting July 6th, immediately after the July 4th American holiday weekend, Independence Day weekend, we'll be going live, and you will be able to speak to us and speak with us. We'll open the conversation to anyone that wants to improve their English, discuss politics, and follow these developments straight to the 3rd of November. The 2nd of November is a Monday, and therefore we'll have the event on the 2nd of November. But the 3rd of November is the election, and our summaries will continue through the month of November because we're very interested, not just myself, but candidates, the candidates in general, the election process, are all interested in seeing just how Trump responds in the event that he loses. It's not clear. He has been disseminating attacks on the election process, which seem to indicate that he's preparing to contest the results in the case that he loses, because now the economy is not doing so well. It'll still to be seen if COVID will be a major problem in the fall, or whether the economy will be back on track, whether people will be working, how high the unemployment rate will be, things like this. But anyway, in every week will be more intense, and the results, we don't know what the results will be. And even if Trump loses, we still don't know if he will accept those results. So stay with us, and as I say, if you're interested in participating, please write to us. The address is formazione@globalfocus.it, or just send us a comment on the Facebook website. Thanks very much. Hope to see you next week, 9 p.m. Take care. And register to vote.